What is up, nerds, geeks, and collectors alike? Today we're taking a look at the Hasbro / Takara Tomy Transformers Studio Series number 54 Voyager class Megatron from the 2007 live-action movie. I'm really excited for this figure due to the fact that my collection started with the 07 leader class Megatron. So let's take a close look at the packaging. Here we have a view of the figure itself, a beautiful artwork of Megatron from the 2007 movie, along with the 54 and below that Studio Series. And we have the Hasbro logo as well as the Takara logo right here. I got this figure from my local Toys R Us, and yes, here in Asia, Toys R Us continued operating after closing down in America and Canada. It never stopped selling toys here. Fortunately, they are planning on reopening there, but due to this pandemic, they are unable. And at the side here, we have the Autobot logo and as well as another artwork of Megatron. Moving on to the back, we have our obligatory product shot, and you don't actually get a bio for Megatron. I like the fact that they're throwing it out there. You know who he is. He doesn't need a bio whatsoever, as if the company is saying that you already know who Megatron is. If you don't know who Megatron is, what are you doing here? This is not a place for you. And obviously you're lost, so get out of here. Moving on, here we have the Studio Series, the number 54, and another headshot of Megatron, which is really awesome. It captures his 07 look very beautifully. And looking at the top, here we have the logo of the first movie, Transformers, simple as that. And at the bottom, we have the legal mumbo jumbo as well as the UPC. So let's break him out of the ice and witness his infinite glory.
Where is the cube? The humans have taken it. You fail me yet again, Starscream. Get them!
And here we have Studio Series number 54 Megatron from the 2007 live-action movie, and he looks extremely awesome. I cannot get enough of looking and playing with this figure. He definitely makes me feel like a little kid again in Christmas Eve, like the first time I opened my 2007 leader class Megatron, which is the first toy I really got attached with. I got it from my grandparents. And before we start, let's take a look at this backdrop. I really like what Studio Series was going here. They really had the collectors in mind when they thought of adding a backdrop. It's printed nicely and it's really good for displaying, but what I've noticed is Hasbro and Takara, what they did here is copy and paste the same picture for different characters for different classes, which I thought was a little redundant, and it kind of looks silly to post them together with one identical background. I thought that they were at least going to make different pictures, so at the end when you complete all of the, let's say, 07 movies, you can put together the backdrops and it would fill up into a entire scene, not just one photo over and over again for the different characters. But unfortunately they didn't do that. That would have been more awesome. That would have added more to the playability and displayability of the figure. Well, that's just my little nitpick with the backdrop. And here we have Megatron himself, the head honcho of the Decepticons, and I really like this silver metallic finish. It's really nice to see Studio Series improving little by little, even though that there are some miss and hits with this toy line. There are some characters that they got right, and there are some characters that were meh, and then there were some characters that were just poorly executed. But this figure is a hit for me. They got Megatron right. But there are one major nitpick I have with this figure, and let's get into that a little later. But first, let's take a look at the head sculpt. Here we have Megatron, and they really did a spot-on job of replicating Megatron's head sculpt from his CGI render. This is a 100% spot-on representation of Megatron's head. I really like what they did. And here is the major nitpick. As you can see, this may be Megatron, but the chest piece, this is from the Revenge of the Fallen Megatron, not the '07 live action, which is, I wouldn't say unfortunate, but it could have been 100% Megatron, 100% representation of Megatron. And a friend actually pointed it out to me that the chest was wrong, but for the other parts such as the legs and then the arms, it hits. It's Megatron for me, or at least it's '07 Megatron for me. I don't have a problem with that. Now that I've seen or noticed that chest piece, I can't unsee it, but it's still a good figure. And he has a very clean back, which is very rare to see when it comes to Transformers figures, and unfortunately they couldn't nail it with the legs. And I understand, the wings have to come from somewhere, or at least go to somewhere, and I can live with it, I guess. I have figures that are the worst kibble, and this isn't one of them. Actually, I can let this slide. This is still one of the best Studio Series for me. And since it's a movie figure, you always have something to admire. The mechanical details, the painting, and what I like, even though the chest may be ROTF, I like what they did here where the nose of the plane covers up the gap from the sides, which is really smart on Hasbro's part. Like I said, they're improving little by little. And I thought it was a nice touch that they added to the figure. And again, I cannot unsee that chest. I know that some of you might just notice it from this review or noticed it first time, but there it is. It's there. Whatever you do, it's there. And looking at his weapon, this is the only accessory that Megatron comes with apart from his backdrop, which is a really nice weapon. I just wish that they added his fusion cannon, the one that needs both his arms to connect. But this piece alone, it's really awesome. I don't think it needs any more painting. Personally, for me, I don't think it needs more painting. The gray plastic is kind of enough. It contrasts well with the figure itself. And for him to hold this, let's take Megatron's arm and then flip his hand in, and there's a slot there in between that silver bits, as you can see, and this long piece goes in there, and it really holds together quite well. It's actually a snug and tight fit. You won't have any problems. It won't be slipping out anytime soon. Even if you insert it 100 times, I guarantee you it's a very secure connection. And surprisingly enough, it doesn't damage the plastic at all. That long piece from the weapon itself that you insert inside, it doesn't damage the plastic, especially with figures that have accessories or parts that break over time due to the fact that you're using it, that it gets stressed, gets worn down, and it completely breaks. And another thing I like about this weapon, the flail, it's like it's a Megatron-esque weapon because Megatron used this in the G1 cartoon, and I like the fact that we get to see this in a live action sequence, even just for a short period of time. But it would have been better if they included his fusion cannon that he uses on Optimus later on in the film.
Give me the Allspark and you may live to be my pet. Oh, so unwise.
For articulation, let's start with the head. He can turn his head on the right on a 180 degrees and a little to the left due to the fact that it hinders it from the nose of the plane, which is unfortunate. It's the only way to tuck the nose of the plane neatly. You have to put it at the back of his head. That's why he said is his neck actually is on a hinge, and then his head is on a ball joint. And as you can see here, if we open it up, you can see the nose of the Cybertronian plane. So in order to have a neat and clean look of Megatron, you really have to hide it right behind his head. But thankfully it doesn't hinder his looking up that much. It's just right. It could have go further up, but it's okay. And then it can look down that far, and then for the arms you can open it up that far out, and then it can do an entire 360 with a bicep swivel and then a 90-degree bend. This I wouldn't consider as articulation, more like for the transformation, but let's just add that to the articulation section of the figure. Unfortunately, he does not incorporate any torso movement or even a whisk swivel. But for the leg, he can bring his leg that up and then back a little to the back, and then he can actually do the splits pretty fairly, actually perfectly. He can really split. And for the chunky feet, he has a thigh swivel, and then surprisingly he can perform more than just a 90-degree bend on his knee, despite having those kibbles, those wings. He has a toe bend, and at the back you can adjust this in order for stability, and then a wonderful pivot, and then again with the toe bend. That goes the same for the other leg, and that's his articulation. And Megatron has a fair amount of articulation, considering that he may be one of the most movie accurate figures out there in the Studio Series line. Even though he has that kibble-tastic feet, it still doesn't hinder his possibility. Now for size comparisons, here he has a fellow Studio Series figure, Leader Class Blackout from the 07 movie as well. Let's add Barricade here, also from the 07 movie. He is also a Studio Series, a deluxe class. As of now, this is my only Studio Series figures. These are my Studio Series figures. In addition to him is the Studio Series Leader Class Shockwave from the Dark of the Moon. As of now, here are my major players from the Decepticons, but you can't have a size comparison for Megatron without his iconic nemesis, the one and only Optimus Prime. And here, as you can see, I can say for the Studio Series line, they aim for scaling and detailing of the figures to look as movie accurate as possible, and I think they pulled it off when it comes to when it comes to robot mode. That is, I can see some difference and some inaccurate scaling when it comes to vehicle forms, but for the robot mode, seeing them together is really a sight to behold, especially when it comes to Optimus Prime and Megatron. Megatron is always depicted as a little bigger than Optimus Prime, but that doesn't mean Optimus Prime doesn't have a chance. It's always a blast when these two are on screen.
Don't deserve to live.
They deserve to choose for themselves.
And you will die with them.
Join them in extinction!
The rivalry of these two have spanned from 1984 up until now, but whenever these two are on screen, you really know you're in for a ride. But as much as I like watching these two fight for what they believe in, I also like to vibe while transforming figures. Megatron in his Cybertronian jet mode. It is really awesome, especially covered in this pristine metallic silver. I really like that touch, especially that the paint doesn't easily chip. I really like that. You can actually play and be rough with the figure. But of course, as a jet, he deserves to be in the air rather than the ground. Especially if you consider that the bottom piece of the jet mode is his chest, and if you put that on a rough surface, there's a chance of chipping paint, and we can't have that. While I pose, and I'm trying to be careful with this figure, especially with this paint. Paint is really my primary concern with this figure. I fear that for quite some time, maybe if I accidentally leave it exposed to sunlight, it may turn yellowish. It's definitely something I'm going to look after and try my best as carefully as I can, try to avoid such anomalies. We don't need that here. I like to keep my figures as they are, clean and pristine. Moving on to the size comparisons, let's start with the Studio Series Leader Class Blackout. That is, if I'm able to fit him in the frame, because he wouldn't fit in the frame and my studio is too big. Especially with Blackout and his propellers, he is a really massive figure when he's in helicopter mode. He gains a lot of length when he is in this form, and it's a real challenge to fit these two together in one frame. And how do we do this? I think I should just stand them up. Let's try that. Push comes to shove, I'd already elevated my camera, but this works. Actually, this works. I really like this. It's not the best, but it fits. At least they fit in the frame and on my studio. And I think Megatron should be a little bigger besides Blackout. And here we have the Studio Series Deluxe Class Barricade, which is a really nice figure. But again, as you can notice, Megatron can use a little more mass into him. He's a little too small for my taste. And here we have Studio Series Leader Class Shockwave, who's a very heavy retool of Revenge of the Fallen Megatron, which I really don't mind. Shockwave, he really looks cool in tank mode. Megatron isn't the only tank, and considering that he doesn't even actually transform in the Dark of the Moon, and here we have Optimus Prime. Last but not the least, Optimus Prime. We can't have a size comparison with Megatron without Optimus. And again, I think Megatron should be a little bigger with this alt mode, but I guess if he was a little bigger, then we'd have to incorporate that nose. It's already bad when it comes to his robot form, which hinders his head. But I think it's a fair size comparison between these two. I think it works. I think it's good enough, I guess. Especially that I'm gonna display these guys on robot mode, which really looks great when it comes to scaling and alone with visual appeal. But it's nice to have the option to be able to transform them. So final thoughts on the figure. I personally enjoyed playing with this figure, let alone posing and displaying him along with my other Studio Series figures. He is one of the best Studio Series figures up to date, and I won't be retracting that statement anytime soon. From the painting and the sculpting of the figure, it's really a 10 out of 10 for me. The painting is with this silver. I really like it. It's visually appealing, especially in contrast with this gray bits. It doesn't look like a convoluted mess. That goes the same for the sculpting, especially to the sculpting, knowing that this comes from a from a live action movie. So that's it. That's Studio Series Megatron from the 2007 live action film. If you like this video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. And till next time, see ya!